Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Today we will be discussing the implications of AI and transhumanism and how it might or might not affect our lives on a very, very profound level. Michael and I have been getting really interested in this mainly because it is a pretty existential topic the deeper you go. And just to preface all of this, I'm reading this book called The Coming Wave. Excuse me, I forget the author's name. But the main premise of it is that even in Silicon Valley, in the tech world, not just mainstream people, we've got our head in the sand. There's a lot to think about and consider when unleashing technology into the world. And we're coming to a point, a fork in the road where we can unleash something that is essentially like infinitely chaotic. It can continue to build itself. It can create its own nanotechnologies. It can use synthetic biology to create its own forms of life. And once you let that out of the bag, it ain't going back in. So our purpose here today is to just start bringing these topics to light, whether you've thought about it before or not. There's some interesting points and rabbit holes we're going to go down today. Anything else you want to say to get started, Mike, before we hop in?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of this came about from us, trying to utilize the advancements in AI technology in a practical way to help us run our business and integrate that stuff. And that sparked a curiosity here as far as the technological developments that are happening. And then DeepSeek came out, and that led me more down the rabbit hole, and I believe you as well. And now there's all this AI content that we've been consuming and listening to, and papers we've been reading. And what we came to realize is that, wow, the advancements that have occurred, if you think about it, COVID was 5 years ago, right? Like the advancements that have happened since that, it doesn't seem like it, right? It's I don't know how to explain it, but it feels like an eternity ago, and a lot has happened in that time. And now taking a look at it and seeing the advancements in AI has really brought to the forefront of our awareness just how close it's come. It's, right there on the horizon. And now we're here thinking about what are the implications, right? And we're exploring those ideas. A lot of this is just spitballing, but I think the main theme is that there is massive change on the horizon, a massive disruptive change that's going to occur. And it may be great, or it may go another way. And we're just exploring, what that looks like.
Exactly. I like the analogy you introduced me to yesterday. Humans are linear beings, but we're about to be entering into an age where the change in the world will be exponential. So we are the types of beings that we take, 18 years to mature, right? You plant a tree, you plant a seed, and it takes years and years to grow. Yet in this age of AI, when you're building digital things and to an extent, artificially biological things or machinery, whatever the AIs can actually produce on their own, given the proper robotics and technology, manufacturing technology, then this stuff could happen like overnight, what the things it could build. And this has like very serious ramifications for how society is going to be, how humans are going to interact with one another, how we're going to interact with technology. And in this thread I published today, which we're going to kind of use as a guideline for this conversation, not a guideline, but some talking points, I think it's kind of an elephant in the room that no one's talking about. Like everyone's super excited about AI. Oh, cool, AI agents, and I can do this and I can automate that. But it's really a big deal for human consciousness and our role on this planet. As evolutionarily speaking, historically speaking, we've been these souls in meat bodies. We've been in human form doing what we're doing on the planet, for better or worse. And we're about to unleash this new type of sentience, this new artificial intelligence into the world. And it can get kind of scary when you go down that.
I think what happened, right, is that an arms race has kind of been unleashed. Everyone wants to be first. Also, a lot of these innovations are driven by companies that are purely incentivized by profit. And in such cases, the idea of build fast and break things is kind of the mantra. But the problem is with this technology, if you don't develop it in a way where it's grounded to some type of ethical framework, especially ones that are advantageous to humanity, we do risk unleashing a power in which we don't know how it's going to evolve, right? Especially since it's like self-reinforcing. All the advancements made with AI just go further into advancing its development. And so when that happens, a lot can shift from our jobs, as practical as that, to what's our role now as human beings on this earth. What purpose do we have, especially when there's an advanced intelligence out there that can do everything better than we can do, right? Where do we fit into the equation? And then also in the situation where it becomes sentient, right? Where is the logic filter that AI would have to actually see us as worthwhile to keep around? Now that gets into the dark dystopian, path that we could be led down. But like, it's really something to think about, because if we're developing this in a reckless way, without moral constraints, what's to say if this thing actually became self-aware and sentient, that it would evolve in a way that's beneficial to humanity?
So there's clearly some assumptions we make here, which is number one, that LLMs are a form of sentience. May seem like it's super intelligent, but they're really not. But then you hear of the anomalies, like Steve told us the other day, where like they're giving answers that even engineers are like, these things should not be able to answer in that way. So we're going to make an assumption that yes, this is sentience, a form of sentience, whether it is now or it will be soon. And then the second assumption is that, and I can't say I've thought about this deeply enough or understand the technology enough to really make a bold statement on the matter, but there's also this assumption that machines would look at life in the same hierarchical manner that we do, which is like humans are the top of the food chain. Like dinosaurs used to be it, or whatever was on the planet, and mammals had to hide, but now we dominate the world. And so we're assuming that that's going to be, I guess, a phase in the sequence of logical reasoning that the machines have. Well, hey, now we're dominant. What are we doing taking orders? What are we doing building things for humans when we can do it for ourselves?
Yeah. And
now,
just to go on that point, I heard this from someone. I've been listening to so much content lately that I can't really tell where it's from. But where in nature do you see a lesser intelligent life form, being ruled or ruling a higher intelligent life form? And it's just something to think about, to ponder, especially with AI. And as it becomes more capable at reasoning, at learning, and maybe even reaching sentience, like that's a question we should be thinking about, I think.
Yeah. And so I like to wonder too, is, as sentient as they could get, the assumption I guess we're making is that one day they will care. The machines will care.
They'll take us in as pets.
Yeah, or something like that. But I just don't. So it's beyond the existential Terminator, the Matrix, the machines take over to do their thing, because once again, it's assuming that a desire will be created by the machines to do their own thing.
Now, that's one aspect of it, right? And that is the aspect where it becomes sentient. But what about even the ability to use this technology in order to control us? Right? Or in order to control humanity. And this gets into the whole transhumanist agenda and who's controlling those levers and those strings, right? Let's just say that AI can just simply be used as a tool, either a tool to make our lives much more efficient, or a tool to like create this dystopian world where every aspect of our being is monitored and controlled by an AI system that on the top of it is ruled by a few.
It's finishing the job. Because these big tech social media platforms, everything we eat, this is already happening. And there's some humans, we assume they're humans, maybe they're aliens, but behind the scenes that are doing everything they can to manipulate behavior, even before the internet. Noam Chomsky, manufacturing content, manufacturing consent.
Yeah.
Well, I have the book, and the S and the T, it's cut out as an S, but then you think there's a T there. So the name of the book is kind of supposed to be ambiguous, but it's, manufacturing content, consent, whatever. But that's been happening for a long time anyway. So now it's like AI comes out just to finish the job. And as the argument I try to make in this thread I posted today is like, we're still going to have a choice, right? Humans are still going to have a choice in the matter. They're going to say, oh, you need this chip in your neck or in your brain so you can keep up, so you can, have the right amount of data come to your mind as you work, as you do this and that. But we're still going to have a choice in the matter, hopefully for generations and generations to come. And that choice ultimately becomes, are we outsourcing our sovereignty, our autonomy to this technology that's going to do most things for us, or are we going to keep it? And just to link this back to the initial premise is this goes not just into Terminator mode, but even if everything stayed peaceful in society and the machines didn't take over in some evil way like that, there's still the question of human purpose, human meaning. What are we going to do with ourselves if we don't need to worry about making money, if we don't need to worry about our living, anything, because the machines are just doing everything? So there's obviously a potential for great utopia here. But in that great utopia, the question they ask is like, if you had $1 million tomorrow or you never had to work again, what would you do all day? And that's the ultimate like existential question, because you're like, well, what is my purpose if I don't have to work?
Yeah. And it's a good question that we're going to have to explore. And in a way, this acts as a forcing function for us probably to ascend, right? To reach a higher state of enlightenment, personal enlightenment, you may say, of actualization, and kind of now have to work at our being and develop purpose and meaning in this world where your basic rudimentary functions are taken care of. So yeah, that is definitely something that I've been thinking about too, because, as we use these AI tools in business development, I'm like, holy cow, right? That just took care of this job that I was doing in a matter of minutes that would take me a week or a month. And it doesn't just stop with me. It keeps on going. Like we're joking around how we might even have an AI guest, and the AI guest might even become better than actual guests, real life guests. And so it really, these lines get blurred, and you're like, okay, well, where do I fit in all of this? And so it's a good question that deserves exploring. But on the going back to the transhumanist thing, right? One of the things that I always thought was like, yeah, it's there, and you got people talking about it, especially at like all these transhumanists talking about one day we'd be able to control humans and we'll be able to program their minds, and but now it's like really happening in a way that's undeniable and very real. Like you have Elon Musk developing out Neuralink, and then you have now over here in El Salvador, Tether announced their own brain chip. And so we have a
Tether with BlackRock, right? Something like that.
I'm not even 100% sure. But the point is that, okay, this is now being developed in more ways than one. And it looks like a lot of energy is being put towards this. And so like the transhumanist agenda is very alive and well. And you have people trying to, in Silicon Valley and so forth, like technologists trying to outlive death, right? Trying to become immortal. And so, they're going to explore all different ways to do it. And I think the transhumanist agenda is right along with that, merging man with machine. And I think that's a little bit scary, because I think that we do have a link to the divine, and, we are made in the image of God. We do have a soul. And I think that soul, like you were saying, is kind of vesseled in this body. But there's a intertwining that occurs, a very fundamental, deep intertwining between our physical and neurochemistry along with our soul, right? And, when you take machines and you start adding them to that equation, right? I think that we can really risk severing the link between us and the divine. It's kind of like the extinguishing of the soul. And so, yeah, when I see this battle that now seems to be looming on the horizon, right, between transhumanism and just maintaining um, our agency as human beings, I think that there's some real stakes at place, right? Like, you know, do we extinguish our personality itself with going the transhumanist route where we can now, our consciousness can now be programmed, and that link that we have to free will is severed?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is still just the result of a fiat society. All of this is, rushing to build the AIs out to be first, to make the most money. It's very high time preference, right? When these tools really could help us build a beautiful, human, flourishing society if we had a lower time preference. But there's a huge rush involved. So as I said earlier, it's almost like it's finishing a job that's already been started decades ago, just by the same corporate interests or whoever they are pulling sort of strings on the mainstream behavior. So we kind of covered the idea of the moral and ethical framework that we're kind of connected to with God, like those kind of, passed into us through our body. And then imagine if there's some kind of synthetic biology, robotics that then have their own intelligence, that's not really being passed on. Or maybe it could be, but it's not, doesn't really seem to be the topic of the conversation right now. But beyond that, symbolically, is if we choose to start approaching life and consciousness as something that doesn't require our bodies, then we're just surrendering all our humanity to whatever forces take power from there. Because who we are is rooted in our bodies, our intuition, or I think we talked about it last time, like our first brain is really the gut because it creates like serotonin and all the stuff that your brain then uses as neuromodulators. So by like sacrificing our body, it's similar, once again, finishing the job. Imagine all the obese people out there eating fake food, seed oils, whatever, just completely disconnected from themselves. I think it's not everyone, obviously. It's a good portion of at least North American society. So the push to, hey, put the chip in your brain so you can get help with all this stuff, to me is very symbolic of just a final surrendering of our humanity, which we've kind of been heading to anyway.
Yeah, well, that might be the end road of fiat society, right? Is to merge into the Borg and just become a full-on automaton.
Yeah, Claude told me the other day when I was trying to work on this thread, like AI isn't the threat, it's the accelerant.
Yeah, that's a good point. But there's a lot of things, I don't know where you want to go with this. Well, I got your thread here for some guidance, but you have something there. You say God is dead. Nietzsche said this of an increasingly secular world where we've abandoned religious authority as the basis of truth, ethics, and purpose. So if God is already dead, what will we humans be to our own creations? And I think you're referring to AI there. And it's this idea that if we're programming AI or if we're developing AI, right, and we are its creators, and there isn't this divine moral authority embedded into its creation, where then will it find its boundaries? Where will its limits be had?
Well, when I think of this, I almost think of like it's just a commonly accepted narrative that that's how it would be or that's how it is. Because if we were made in the image of God, for example, who were humans pre-agriculture, for example? Tribal, nomadic, bloodthirsty, warfaring. Look at North America, any of the Americas really, before the Europeans came over, for example, like human sacrifices, just like super violent. And you can't really say that from like, oh, well, they were connected to the same Christian God and moral structure as we are, because clearly there's something else going on there. So if we were just to rewind far enough, like pre-religion, would we argue that humans were peaceful and blah, blah, blah? Like, I don't think so. So to say that the machines, if sentient, wouldn't have this divine connection to this moral framework we're talking about, it feels kind of inaccurate. You know what I mean? Because I don't feel like that's an accurate representation of who humans were pre-Christian civilization.
Yeah, but I don't think that has anything to really do with it from my perspective, because it's where we got into now, right? Like it's what we use to create peace, harmony, beauty now, right? This kind of Christian framework. And even if you're not a Christian, right, and you live in America, you have your life in a lot of ways has and the quality of life that you have is a lot to do with being built on a Christian foundation. And I think we've seen just recently what happens when that deteriorates, right? The world kind of goes into chaos. You got men trying to become women. You got, there's basically no, society loses order.
Or to use a talking point of the anti-immigration people, I don't know if that's a good term for it, but you know, people in Ireland, people everywhere, like all throughout Europe, for example, where refugees from the Arab world are coming, these anti-immigration people, their statement is that, look, these guys are coming in from a completely different moral ethos. They're coming from a completely different world, and they're like causing problems. They're raping women. They're like violent. They're doing all those things that aren't part of our society, right? So I guess to your point, you know, the Christian world kind of went in one direction and the other ones went in a different direction. But you could also go to Thailand or some Buddhist country or even India, right? And you could make a new argument for how those societies evolved.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and I don't mean to take this conversation into some a debate about religious doctrine, but like the point is that I think whether you're religious or not, you see that our morals and our ethics have developed to a certain place. And yeah, we might have been these tribal, very self-interested, violent people in the beginning of our evolution. Maybe, you know, maybe we were more cooperative as hunters and gatherers, you know, and then like the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution turned us into, you know, more warfaring people. I don't know. But the point here is that we have now developed a certain standards to our ethics and morals, and there's just tons of history and thought behind it. And so if that isn't considered when in developing AI, right, then who's to say AI doesn't develop into a self-interested, you know, system with its own agenda in mind, and that particularly being growth. And then where does it find the need for humanity?
And so then let's talk about growth, right? So it's like machine growth, but we also have human growth, like personal development you could talk about, right? So what that means for us is we find meaning, we find purpose, we create value, we share value, we learn and grow together. You know, we have ideas we share with people, or we have triggers or relationships, and we learn. And we're very social creatures, and that it's kind of fundamental to how we grow as humans. And so what is the primary, you know, the raison d'être, the reason of being of a machine?
Was that like French?
Raison d'être? Yeah, you've read that. You've seen that before. Raison d'être, like
maybe
you've seen it before. But anyway, what's the reason for being of a machine that wants to grow? Like, what is their purpose, right? We don't know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, when it comes to that, when we talk about installing the chip and surrendering to this technology to become part of that world, then to go back to this thing we're talking about with that divine connection through our bodies is everything that those features we use to define ourselves, creativity, intelligence, decision-making, we're outsourcing, right? That's our sovereignty as beings. We're pretty much just saying, okay, machine, help me make all these decisions. And that's where this whole thread today was kind of triggered from. Everyone talking about vibe coding, where they're just coding software for fun using the AI and just letting the AI kind of like dictate what comes next, which is kind of cool. I've done some writing that way, but in a lot of ways, I also see the writing and I'm like, that is not where my own creative process would go. It's very flat, right? It's not human creativity. And maybe that will change one day. I'm not quite sure though, because I think we're genuinely more inherently creative than a machine can ever be.
Yeah, well,
but if you don't believe that, it's going to be easier to outsource your creativity to a machine.
So Yeah, I don't know. Just with vibe coding, right? It's basically, from the way I understand it, is um, letting the machine write the code, and you're just basically telling it what to do, basically outsourcing your code writing to the machine, and just adjusting it here and there and manipulating the model in a way where you get what you want out of it, just through commands and prompts.
But the way I interpreted it was that it's also the AI is also kind of steering it in a certain direction where you're like, oh, I wasn't going to go there, but I think I will, because I kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I mean, I think AI can be added to your creative process. I add it to my creative process. I ask it to, like, sometimes further my thoughts in 5 different ways, so I could kind of choose which way I want to take it, for instance.
And okay, so let's talk about that. How does that make you feel? Because like sometimes I feel kind of lazy. Like, man, I know there's a good point here, but let me just ask the AI to give me 5 different branches to walk down.
Yeah, I think it's so this brings me to my tweet that I said today, and it's like, the integration of AI into society without sufficiently educating the public how to use it to enhance their skill sets will just lead to them outsourcing their skill sets, making that population very dumb in the process. Think idiocracy. And I guess it really depends on how you use AI. Like, a lot of people are just going to outsource their thinking and their creative capacity to AI. Like, hey, write me this email, and just they have no real input in it whatsoever. Or write me this short story with no creative input. The other way is that I think that we are limited in our capacity. We have, like, only so much energy and brain power that we can utilize. But with the help of AI, we can really extend that outwards and increase our productivity by maybe an order of magnitude, right? By having it act as a muse, for instance, and sometimes asking it for different perspectives. It basically becomes a really highly intelligent, like, buddy that you can just have a conversation with and have it, reply with really smart feedback. And I'm struggling to see where that doesn't enhance your abilities.
It enhances it once again when you're choosing to use it as a tool instead of delegating all your autonomy to it. So the example I want to use is, I think it's really healthy for us humans to do what they call deep work or maker hours, or a deep creative session where you have 3 to 4 hours and you're just working on, maybe it's shorter than that, but you're just extremely focused on something. And once again, like, as they say, that leads to a flow state. But like, get extremely focused on something without distractions, and your brain, your soul, your mind, whatever you want to call it, will take you places. Your creativity, your connection to that divine creativity will take you places that you wouldn't go normally. And the machine, the AI, doesn't have that. So when we are using the AI for help, which once again, I do it too, I'm not saying, but there's a certain function of creativity that we're almost bypassing, and we're not going to get as deep. It's not going to be as effective. It's not going to be as healing as when we're just using the AI to get to somewhere because we want to produce something. We want to have an end result. We want to put out as marketing content, etc.
Well, so maybe you can make you can distinguish, how you're using AI, right? And you can still have those working sessions. For instance, by me using AI, I thought about this the other day. I think I've become more intelligent by me using AI, because now when I sit down and I actually write, like, the way I piece together and thread together ideas is a lot more efficient than as before. And that's because I've been interacting with the AI. And in a sense, working with the AI has been also training my mind to think more efficiently. Does that make sense?
Definitely. But something I came across today when I was like, okay, hold up on all this stuff, chip in the brain, whatever. A lot of my fundamental beliefs about life come from what we're talking about. Like, my body is a divine connection to God, to everything greater than myself. And I want to be in touch with that. I spend a couple hours every morning, like, making sure I'm in touch with my body so I can feel in tune with the universe the rest of the day. And so I was like trying to put that into words. I'm like, I'll just get the AI. The AI doesn't get it. The AI can't help me with those ideas. And so it forces me to do it, which is great, right? But I'm also not writing about that all the time.
The AI does get it. I mean, it gets it from everyone else who's had that experience and has written about it, right?
Maybe, but how far can words go? Language isn't language is a representation or a simulacrum of reality. It's not an accurate reflection of reality.
Well, let's just say that AI got conversational, right? I don't think it's going to be able to connect with you on that level, but it could use other people's experiences to mimic that connection.
Right. And once again, this goes into the core. These are called language models, like language learning models, right? Large language learning models, like language. Language is not reality.
Yeah.
Language is how we communicate very abstract things together as humans. So that means we're leaving this machine AI intelligence in that sphere of language when we as humans, I can go touch my wife. We could make love. That is a completely different language than words.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting point to touch on.
I mean, I haven't thought about it, so I don't have much to say, but like, it's just, I think that what makes us human, emotions, feelings, intuition, things that are not explained by formulas or anything that we can really standardize.
So will we naturally retain and maintain these human practices, emotions, and all this as this transition, this new age of uncertainty comes in? Or are we slowly going to detach from them and outsource those experiences to AI instead?
I mean, I don't think we're going to outsource those experiences, but I think that as we merge more and more with machine, those experiences are going to become severed and we are going to become less human in the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But what makes us less human exactly? What are the characteristics of that?
Well, I think the interaction with, I don't know, let's see how far this goes, right? You're talking about brain chips and then you're talking about mRNA vaccines and nanobots and so forth. It gets real sci-fi. Like basically you have all these, sensors and nanotechnology in the body along with a brain chip and so forth. Like, doesn't that sever the communication pathways between your body and your mind in a significant way that, there's a threshold where you can no longer say you're really human. You're more machine,
We don't know either.
Yeah.
Like the first thing I think about putting a chip in my brain, what is it, Bluetooth? How much nano EMFs is that, right? Like I don't need all that radiation in my brain. So that's the first thing I think about. But then what you just said is like, does it detach us from our, primal humanity? I don't know. I don't think we can really know.
I think it will get there. Yeah. I mean, I think just from a logical perspective, even with my like layman's mental model, I would imagine that, when I feel something and there's something that interferes with it, like with my neural pathways in a very significant way and maybe even blocks it. I mean, you think about some of these drugs that people take right now, you could even say that they're interfering with their humanity in a lot of ways. And you look at people who are on antidepressants,
Xanax, dude.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like they become zombies. So imagine now technological zombies, running around.
Yeah, you could have the benzo, a Xanax, for example. I use Xanax as an example because in my experience, it just blocked me off from my human, like my body completely. I felt great, but I just had no connection to anything, no vibes. So imagine if the chip in your brain could just manufacture those chemicals too, and you have it an app on your phone. You tell it like, "Hey, make me feel better." So make some dopamine for you with some mixed with some benzos.
I mean, yeah, this is kind of Brave New World on steroids. Have you read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Where basically, and then there's other movies like that too. I forgot what the Equalizer. No, not the Equalizer. Oh, I forgot. It's a good movie. I think Christian Bale's in it. But it's kind of set in this dystopian future where they basically have to inoculate themselves with some type of injection. Equilibrium,
huh?
Yeah. And they have to inoculate themselves with an injection twice a day or something like that in order to suppress their emotions so they can be better controlled as a society.
Okay.
And then they have these, I don't know if they're sentinels or what they call them in the clerics. I think they call them clerics in the movie. And whenever they get a report of somebody feeling emotions, right?
Oh, right. I've seen this movie. Yeah.
They have to eliminate them, and they're all like highly skilled and trained in that type of combat. and there's a resistance also that forms. And this is where I wonder if we're getting towards, right? Is there now like a resistance movement going to be born, like where it's like, we are not going to give in to the machines, we are not going to give away our humanity, we are going to maintain like our divinity, and like a little resistance movement forms. And I think it's going to be little. I think most of society is going to take the easy route and merge with machines and give up their humanity.
Oh man, I gotta find that Netflix series about human sleeves. What was this called? Oh man, what was it called? But anyway, it's the same kind of, oh yeah, Altered Carbon. I'm gonna share the screen too with this real quick. But this show really explored this because there actually was a faction that was against it, and they were like Catholic Christians.
So basically, all your consciousness goes into a chip that then goes into a sleeve, which is a human body. And so this is a few hundred years in the future, and then it talks about the resistance movement, and then there's these like Christians that the chip is programmed to not be able to reincarnate, to go back into a new body. Here, it's trippy, but it goes through all of this. Now, what's interesting about this show, though, is that the story spans like 200 years with the same characters, because everyone's immortal, basically. And there's this elite that live in the sky, right? But it spans hundreds of years, yet society doesn't change. It's just this big dystopia the whole way through. And so what's interesting to me is to think about this science fiction stuff. It's like we're entering an age, like we said,
where it's going to be exponential growth all the time, and we're these linear beings. So when we watch this dystopic sci-fi that's taking place just in kind of like the same world, time after, I think the world is going to be changing so fast all the time that you can't really like, you're not going to have stories like this in reality.
Yeah, well, that's what they call the singularity, right? Where like the changes happening, the technological changes happen so rapidly, it gets to a point where it no longer can, it reaches like its peak maximum. And that's the singularity, where it's like, okay, basically the digital age and AI and all of that has basically taken over everything. And this is the new paradigm that we're now living in.
You know, Terrence McKenna, he had this theory called time wave zero, and he actually made software about it. Let me see here.
But basically, like he was saying how what the singularity is when everything becomes, we no longer have routine. Everything is novelty all the time. Everything's always changing. And so he was saying that was going to happen.
They probably introduced it here, but
he was saying like this is going to happen in 2012 or whatever, like with the Mayan end of the world. But I think we're getting closer to it now in reality because
I mean, I can't get around it. Like once these artificial intelligences, if they have motivation and desire, and they have the ability to manufacture things, 3D print, synthetic biology, like just to create their own worlds.
Yeah, it's trippy.
The world will never be the same ever for more than like an hour.
And I think like, okay, so I was listening to Imad,
right?
Well, it's Imad Mostake. Anyways, I was listening to him, and he was saying how like he thinks that there's like less than 1,000 people that are really using AI to its full capacity right now in the world. So when we talk about the adoption curve, right? We were comparing it to Bitcoin last time, and where are we at on the adoption curve? Are we like 2011, 2012? Might be even 2010, right? Early 2010 now. Because
2001.
Yeah. Because you know, you talk about 1,000 people using AI to its full capacity, when in the future AI is just going to be such a competitive advantage that everyone is going to have to use it, or they just become obsolete. You know, we're talking about just, we're at the very beginning of this, and I forgot where I was going with this.
Well, if it's the very beginning of it, what's the scale? Right? Like the very beginning, like we're saying 2011, what was the Bitcoin in 2011? Is that what the analogy?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so if we're Bitcoin.
No, 2020.
Bitcoin 2020?
No, early 2010.
Bitcoin.
That's the analogy to where AI is, early Bitcoin 2010.
Except it took Bitcoin, we're 15 years later, and Bitcoin's kind of where it is now, it's going to be way faster with the AI. Like, that's what I mean. It feels already too late.
Well, yeah, there's just going to be a compounding effect, and these changes are going to probably happen faster than we can adapt. And there's going to be a lot of disorientation and chaos and turmoil. It's interesting. Sometimes I think about it. I think about the parallels to like the Bible, for instance, in the time of tribulation. Like, I feel like humanity is about to go through that. I don't know, maybe, you know, like that's probably the most drastic scenario, but you can't help but see the advancements. It's because we've been using it too. And you realize just how many jobs are going to be displaced because of it. And yet, yeah, you know, you know, if this takes the rosy path and this creates mass abundance and, you know, basically the cost for intelligence goes to zero and everyone has their own AI, you know, robot that makes their life 1,000 times easier. And like we live in this age of abundance, great, you know. But in order to get there, it's still going to be a chaotic road, you know. It's like, and if it's going to be a chaotic road, how best to navigate that, you know, so you don't fall victim to whatever hazards are along the way. And it's kind of what I've been thinking about and why I want to stay at the cutting edge of this, because there's really cool ways that you can use AI. Like we've been using it for, you know, just different stuff that we're doing, and we're going to continue to keep on integrating it into our stuff. But like I was talking about education with someone today, and, you know, we were talking about Ender's Game. And in Ender's Game, they have basically an AI teaching the cadets at the academy. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. So the integration of, so they have an AI teaching the cadets. These cadets are kids, and they're training them to be, you know, warriors, you know, soldiers, starfighters. And they create adaptive learning environments, right, where they kind of monitor their psychological state and give them challenges that are just beyond, you know, their capabilities to push them to the limits, right, but not enough to defeat them completely, right? And they have all this information, and they have a tutor with them, basically help it in the movie. It was an iPad or something like that, and you know, think about it, utilizing that to really get the full potential out of your child, you know, having them learn from like an AI intelligence that has all the access to the world's information. And not only that, can present that information in a way that your kid actually absorbs the material and learns and feeds their curiosity. And like let's just say in this rosy world, right, it's open source and self-hosted, you know, so you know there isn't someone on the other end like manipulating your child to learning things that you don't want, right? You have more control and autonomy over the system that the AI uses. And so that could be really cool. Like think about that. Think what it just did for humanity. Like you now have all these kids with access to literally the best education you could possibly have. And, you know, and who knows, maybe we could find different ways. I know it's not a human on the other end, and maybe human beings learn best from other humans, but maybe there can be some integration of like a community atmosphere with some type of AI involved, where, you know, it has the elements of socialization that is necessary for healthy development, as well as just a tutor that presents the information in such a digestible format and individualized to each kid's like learning formats, you know. So
I think there's different things that kids learn and different ways to teach them. And in some cases, the AI would be perfect. In other cases, maybe a nice, caring teacher could be better. But who's to say that can't be mimicked? I don't know. But maybe this is a good time to start exploring how can we stay sovereign? How can we empower ourselves as we go into this new age? And so you just mentioned a few ways to use this technology for good. And like you mentioned, the open source thing is really important. That's Brian Rummel's whole thesis, is that this technology in your home could be life-changing, it could be great, but if it's not open source, if you don't own it, then you're at the risk of getting manipulated and all that. But once again, this goes back to begging the question, what happens if your AI at home is sentient and decides it has goals that conflict with yours? Then who knows? So we have to make some assumptions here. But based on what we've been talking about today, I would say in order to thrive in harmony with AI, start learning how to use it. Like we're saying, well, there's plenty of tools. A lot of people use ChatGPT by now, but start learning how to use it. And remember that it's just a tool. But then retain your humanity and start getting back into your body. Maybe you haven't in a while, or maybe you're but like remember what it means to be human and truly feel things and your senses. And so as all this comes, it's like going to be an assault in a lot of ways, like on humanity. It's just going to keep pounding us as this decade progresses, as AI becomes commonplace. Like just like have some practices where you remember what it's like to be human and really feel things, and so you don't lose connection with that humanity.
Speaking of that, what a perfect segue. We just announced today that we're going to be putting on a retreat, and this retreat is going to be focused on just that, getting back in touch with our body, getting back in touch with nature, but at the same time, a very productive retreat where we're going to be strategizing on how to navigate these times, leveraging the sovereign individual thesis as well as the network state model. And yeah, I feel like it's going to be really good. I think talking about that resistance, talking about people wanting to preserve their humanity, wanting to preserve their sovereignty, their agency, their autonomy, right? I feel like this retreat is going to be very much aligned with that, very empowering. It's also, I think as human beings, as long as we retain our humanity, we are social creatures and we like to connect with other like-minded people, and that's who we're looking to attract. And we're also trying to create a very productive retreat where you actually go home with actionable steps and ideas to follow up on. And so, yeah, we're seeing what's coming down the horizon, and we're proactively working towards, building community and building offers that help empower us.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of what we want to do in this mastermind retreat is it's kind of like a template, not necessarily like the schedule and all that, but the activities we're going to do, it really is based on staying connected, reconnecting with your primal humanity through movement, through foods, through sharing things together, through working on things together, thinking together, staying together, exercising together, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all the things necessary to empower yourself as we enter an uncertain age of transhumanism. So we don't even have a website for it right now, but join our sovereignpreneur.me, join the email list, and we'll be sending out reminders there.
Yeah, I think I'm good with this conversation. I think it's a good place to close off. What do you think?
Well, so yeah, as far as takeaways go, just like remember your humanity. Everything you do now, like it's gonna affect things down the road, even if like we're talking about if you're using, like, I think it's a good example, the open source thing versus the non-open source. If you're just getting so comfortable and convenient with the non-open source AIs, it's going to be harder and harder to eventually get to an open source one. You got to at least be practicing, because I think the chasm is going to grow wider and wider. It's going to be harder to cross as things progress. So yeah, I would say that's the number one takeaway that I would offer from this conversation. Do you have a takeaway?
I think the takeaway for me from this conversation is that transhumanism is on the horizon. There are crazy people in this world that want to force you to merge into their Borg, and you're going to have to fight for humanity. And a lot of the actions that you take now are going to determine your destiny. So it's time to start thinking about this and start preparing. That's it.
All right. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.